So for the math unit, I did a unit called All About Fractions. So the whole unit was created at the 3rd grade level, and my unit consists of 4 lessons, all based or all on fractions. So the first lesson is what are fractions. The second lesson is fractions on the number line. The third one is equivalent fractions. And lesson 4 is making equivalent fractions, which is just lesson 4 goes more into detail about creating or how to find equivalent fractions. So lesson 1. Lesson 1 is called What are fractions? And the math standard, the Common Core Math Standard covered is 3.NF.A.1, which is where students must understand a fraction 1 over b as a quantity formed by one part when a whole is partitioned into b equal parts. Understand a fraction a comma b as a quantity formed by a parts of size 1 over b. And my lesson plan can be found at this link if you want to go over in more detail about how the lesson will be carried out. So for lesson 1, the Learning Center activity is called Representing Fractions. In this station, in groups of 4, students will be practicing different representations of the fraction 2/3. This station is an independent activity where students will work with peers in their group. The teacher will come around to check their work before they can move on to the next activity. So students will be completing this worksheet at the station where they have to find the different representations of 2/3 and answer keys down here. So lesson 2 is called Fractions on the Number Line, and the Common Core standard covered in this lesson is 3.NF.A.2, which is where students understand a fraction as a number on the number line, represent fractions on the number line diagram. So my lesson plan for this lesson can be found at the following link. And for the Learning Center activity, it's called Building Bridges. So in groups, students will build 5 bridges in order to cross over the river. These bridges must be in the correct order and must have the correct color posts in the correct locations. Otherwise, the bridges will collapse. Students will be given clues for how to build the bridges, which is found here on the right image. And the given worksheet will have a bridge lines but are missing the color posts. The students' jobs will be to place the posts in the correct spot. So students will be given these clues and they will follow the clues in order to determine where each post belongs at. So on the next slide I have a picture. So the left picture is what the students' worksheet will look like when they're beginning the activity. So as you can see, there's a line diagram, but there's no colored posts, and then students will be reading the clues from the previous page in order to create the bridge. And as you can see on the right side, this is what the bridge will look like when students are done. And as students complete the activity, they're practicing where to place fractions on the number line. Lesson 3 is called Equivalent Fractions, and the content standard covered in this lesson is 3.NF.A.3a, where students understand 2 fractions as equal if they are the same size or the same point on a number line. So my lesson plan can be found at this link, and so this content standard will focus on students comparing fractions by either they have the same size or they're the same point on the number line. And for the Learning Center activity, students will be playing a penguin fraction prediction game. So in this game, students will be working with a partner to predict which of the 2 fractions is larger. Students will discuss their responses and compare fraction bars on the back of the card to determine if their answer is correct. Students will need the game template, a set of fraction cards, and a sheet of paper to record their answers. So this image on the right side is the image of the game template. So in partner, one student will place their card on the left side, and the other student will place their card on the right side, and then they have to decide which one is bigger. So they're going to compare them using the symbols, the greater than, less than, or equal to symbols. And students would be given a set of cards. So this image here on the left side is what the card looks like on the front, and then on the back the cards will have a visual representation of the fraction. So for example, if a student gets 2/5, so it would be this card in the front, and the back would have this image. And then 4/5, so this card would have this image on the back. And then students will compare. So before looking at the back, they will say, I think 4/5 is greater. And then they turn the card over and look at the pictures on the back to make sure they're correct. And if they're not correct, they can discuss with their partners why. And there's a sample image here of how the game can be played. And then for this activity, since students are playing a game, they will have to complete an exit ticket before they can move on to the next activity. And the exit ticket is just a short exercise where they show whether two fractions are equivalent or not based on their visual representation and using the number lines. So lesson 4 is called Making Equivalent Fractions. In this lesson, the content standard that is covered is 3.NF.A.3.B. So this is where students recognize and generate simple equivalent fractions such as half is equal to 2/4 or 4/6 is equal to 2/3. And students will have to explain why the fractions are equivalent. One way they can do this is using visual fraction model. My lesson plan can be found in this link here. And so in this lesson, what's different from this lesson and the other one is that in lesson 3, they had to use a number line or a visual representation to justify the answers why they're equal, two fractions are equal. But in lesson 4, students can use either a visual number line, or they can just show by their shading or any other way to show that two fractions are equal. So the Learning Center activity for this lesson is equivalent models task cards. So in group, students will be given a set of cards. The group will choose 4 cards and find the missing number to create an equivalent fraction. Students will use the visual models as a guide to help them find the missing equivalent fraction. Once students have found the equivalent fraction, students will complete an exit ticket before moving on to the next activity. So this activity has a lot of like 20 cards, but students can choose which 4 they want to do, and then that way they can probably discuss with each other and then why their answers are correct, and use their peers to ask for help if they need help. And the exit ticket for this activity is a short practice exercise where students are comparing fractions using the symbols, and students are given sets of fractions they have to compare, and this can be done in any way they want. It doesn't have to necessarily be a number line. And that is all for my math unit.